So a lot of, at the very beginning, is the very basic pieces. It's here's basically what we're going to teach you to do, and here are the 6. You can write this down.
Right.
6 pieces. This is the system. Okay, the system has 6 components to it.
Go ahead.
The first one is endurance. You both know that.
Right.
Endurance is critical. It's an endurance sport. Period. I don't care what people say, it's endurance. Number 2 is cadence development. Many programs don't focus on cadence, they just focus on power. Okay, that's fine, but in order to get to power, you have to understand cadence.
Right.
And plus gearing. You want to put plus gearing behind that too. So cadence plus gearing. So that whole piece around that cadence component, Coach, is neuromuscular control and patterning from the brain, the synapses in your brain to your working muscles.
Absolutely.
If we don't apply that in these 2 key facets around endurance and cadence, they're missing the boat. They're going to miss that edge. That's the edge right there. That's the edge. If we don't focus on that piece, they're just anyone.
Right.
Okay? So then the third piece is understanding that this whole force development component is important. People say, oh, tension drills don't matter. I'm like, yes, they do matter. It creates that a level of keeping your ligaments in condition, that you don't get injured in the off season. So when you're doing a lot of that strength work, and I say it this way, I don't have time to go to the gym. So we apply workouts inside the program that help the individual create strength based on the workout.
Right.
If you don't have the time, you don't have to go to the gym, let's apply the workouts with the workouts that create the strength.
So you call that force?
Yeah, force development.
And force development, like in my mind, in addition to what you said, is like torque.
Yeah, torque.
Right.
That's it. Torque rotation.
Right.
And learning that people say, oh, you're just mashing the pedals. No, you're not mashing the pedals. You're learning how to pedal efficiently. Do things slow so you can do them fast.
Right.
So the neuromuscular control.
Right.
So you do the cadence at every level from 50 to 120 plus RPMs and everything else in between. Then you do the force development pieces, which are the 50 to 70 RPM range, where you're building strength, but you're keeping that heart rate at zone 3.
Right.
You're not going above that. So you're creating that fat level energy and utilization of energy to help support the energy system that you're trying to put out based on this type of effort. That's why we call it the system, because everything has a system to it. Right. So then the fourth piece is there's threshold development, which is lactate clearance. How do we utilize lactate for energy? How do we utilize it? So it's lactate clearance and or utilization of glucose energy. So the only way to do that is if we understand how to balance the effort, that we're not overdoing it. We're keeping it in a way that's so focused on the intention of the work, not just doing the work. Everybody just does the work.
So you said threshold development, and I heard the again, processing lactate for energy, certainly utilizing the glucose and how you switch between systems. Is it energy systems?
100%.
Right.
100%.
Right.
100%. Energy system. So when I go into this next phase, so this is 80% of what we do. So the first 3 pieces of the system, endurance, cadence, and force development, is 80% of what we do.
Right.
So that force development is also tempo and sweet spot work, of course, right? Because that's in that range of heart rate variation. So we don't focus on power here. We observe power.
Like that.
Right?
Right.
We focus on the heart rate, but we observe what the power is doing.
Right.
So when we start seeing that there's increases in power duration based on aerobic development, because aerobic power is real.
Right.
And people don't focus on the aerobic power piece, they just focus on the threshold power.
Right.
How are you supposed to push the ceiling if you have no aerobic system?
Right.
So we do 80% of the work. 80-20 rule, right?
Right.
With the Pareto chart type thing we learned in high school. 80% of what we do is that general type training, just general. So then the other 20% is the threshold work. That's the 5th piece is speed development. It's not how fast you go, it's how you go fast.
I like that.
Right? So understanding that difference between riding fast but learning how to ride fast is different. Very different.
Got it.
Yep. So learning how to ride fast is important. And a lot of that goes back to the second component. Well, actually the first two components. It's how much endurance have you built? So that's aerobic power that you have to support how fast you can ride. And cadence development on top of how fast you can ride based on cadence and gearing. So people say, oh, I can push 70 RPMs and ride fast, but you could ride faster at 97 in the same gear.
In the same gear.
Right? Look how much distance per pedal stroke you're carrying
Right.
over the duration of that effort.
Right.
So gearing is important, cadence is important, heart rate control is important too. So then the sixth piece is all the variations of all the first five, which is power. How much power can you produce collectively over the entire span of the work? So power is the derivative of endurance, cadence, force development, tempo, speed, and power. And that's the end result.
Right.
That's the system. Very basic. So first year member, they learn all these pieces.
Right. Pardon me.
Don't matter what. I don't care what level they're at.
Right.
I don't care what, because they need to know the system first, so that when we go year two, they have all of these elements built.
Right.
So then, instead of going back to the case all be all right, I'm going to go back to base training. Base training never really stops.
Right.
Because this is base training. All this is base training.
Right.
Base training, foundational work.
I get it. And I would say, particularly when we use the age-old base build, philosophies, that it's maybe we move away from that.
That's right.
And we don't even talk about that
No.
anymore, right? That's not how we design. Because even then, I would say, when people would say, well, your base is not the same base, because if you've been doing this, then your base would be here now as opposed to there or whatever have you. So it's a progression that we're building on. Mm-hmm. So to me, base means you're coming all the way back down somewhere and then going for it. But that's not really what's happening at all, right? Because your base has been elevated. If you're doing this right, your base should have been elevated, right? Sure. Like and that's why we say the 3 year, why it's so important, right? Because that if you're building up, because where you start, you should be building on that and continuing to build on that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll give you an analogy. It's a perfect analogy. It's like reading, or in high school or in elementary school. So you learn reading in elementary school. They teach you the elements of how to actually do it. But if you don't keep practicing it over the summertime, you lose that skill.
Right.
You lose the skill. So you go back to the basic. So in order to get better at reading, you keep practicing it over the summertime, and then come springtime or back to school time,
right,
you're leveling up. You're leveling up your knowledge base.
No, if your teacher did it right, you had a summer reading assignment.
Yeah, bingo.
Right.
And that's what our program is. Exactly the same thing. It's
right.
From November to March, you're going to learn this. You're going to learn the system. You're going to learn it. Right. You're going to go through it. You're going to go through all the processes around it. It's going to go the 80-20 rule. You're going to go through the whole process, so that when spring and summertime roll around, you can leverage the stuff that you learned to do. That's why we're so focused on indoor training, because that's where you can focus in on the effort.
Right.
Period.
Right. Yeah, no, you can get no argument from me. I mean, it's indisputable.
For real.
Right. It really is. It's indisputable. Yeah. I mean, and if you're tracking your metrics well enough, then if you've done that, then you'll be able to clearly see the difference between training outdoors versus training indoors.
100%.
Right, 100%.
And until a person can control that effort outdoors,
right,
I'm gonna tell them to do it.
And who can do that unless you're living in Colorado or someplace, places that are amiable to being able to allow you a 20-30 minute effort, uninterrupted, without cars, lights, or anything else. You might have wild animal run out on you, but other than that, that's just not conducive. Particularly, we're talking about developing our folks who primarily are in urban areas, in urban environments. So we don't have the terrain that allows us to be able to train like that. So indoor has to be a necessary component to what we do.
100%. And on top of that, with the technology the way it is right now, we just had this conversation. Leverage the technology and how it's being used anyway.
Right.
Simulation, key. Oh, it's not the same. Oh, it's not the same indoors as outdoors. I'm like, well, it depends on how you apply it.
Right.
And we apply these principles to training so that people can understand there's a cross between what you do indoors and what you do outside. It's one-to-one relationship between the two, if you think about it that way.
Right.
So those who come, I don't like indoor training because it's boring. Well, there's no purpose behind what you're doing. You're just going on there and riding.
Right.
There's no reason why you're doing what you're doing. But what we do is every workout that's prescribed on their program is purposeful.
Right.
Purposeful.
Not just ride. Right. Purposeful.
100%.
Right.
Even in the recovery rides, they're purposeful.
Right.
Because what we look at is linear symmetry. Right. So every workout that we do, it should be able to see if when you look at a person's workout that off of erg mode. Like I show you workouts on members that we had that it would look like it's erg mode, but it's not. It's so focused on the effort based on cadence and gearing that you wouldn't even think it was erg mode because it's not. Because they're so focused in on keeping things in control.
I need to get there.
Yep.
Right.
And that's that neuromuscular control.
Right.
So if we're just working power and we're not working the nervous system that ties to that,
right,
that's where the game changes.
Right. No, and where this became abundantly clear to me was have you ever heard of the Feldenkrais method?
Tell me more.
Feldenkrais was a neuroscientist that looked at the neurological connection between mind body and worked very closely with paraplegic and other folks to help restore their movement and motions to them. And he then expanded to begin to start working with athletes and dancers, right? Professional dancers. And everything that the exercises did always focused on doing everything slower in order to build up that. And so one of the earlier exercises that I learned in the Feldenkrais method helped me to perfect my pedal stroke to a 50-50 because I had a lot of imbalance. My left leg would, I would have more of a tendency to mash and spin and mash and spin, between the two. But the Feldenkrais method would tell you to move is almost like you're not moving, is how slow you would be moving. Right. But they would tell you something. A simple exercise would be to write the alphabet as slow as you can with your big toe. Right. Right. Write it as slow as you can and as small as you can with your big toe. Right. Imagine you have a piece of rice on your head and make little tiny circles with your head, but try to make them as small as you can. Right. Just again, that neurological adaptation and that mind-body connection that, like we said earlier, when these things are on the wall, instead they're still talking to you. It's because our subconscious mind, another thing, is always awake, always absorbing everything around us, even the stuff that we're not conscious of. The reason why I know to that degree is my mother is a certified hypnotherapist, right? And in the process of hypnotizing people, she can get information that they weren't consciously aware of, like ask you, what did you smell? What do you hear? Right, stuff that you wouldn't even be conscious. It's like, well, I heard such and such. All of that happens because the subconscious mind is perfectly recording things. So our eyes may have just glanced at it, but you pretty much read everything that was on there and weren't conscious of it. But your subconscious mind is perfect. Right. Yeah. So making that connection between our inner selves and our outer selves and aligning them more closely is the relationship that a lot of this cadence work and other stuff sees. That's that connection that we're trying to get to make them have, is their inner self and their outer self aligning. That's why they say you have to visualize yourself kind of doing it and seeing it and going through it, and then the body will say, oh, it'll start to mimic, it'll start to adapt, and it'll start to do that. And then we get to the automatic part, right, where we don't have to think about it anymore. It's just a natural motion, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I get it, Coach, and have some of the science that backs that up too, because I clearly said, why are people using more of the Fowler and Crest method as a part of cycling? It's like, but this is what we talk about. This is what makes us different.
Say it again.
This is what makes us different,
So
right? Because we can see the connection, and some things that totally fly over people's head. They don't even see how that connects.
That's right. And you see it in when clients come on our program and you look at the training peaks and you look at prior workouts before they come to us, there's no indication of cadence in any of the workouts.
Right.
This is power.
Just power.
So in the basic principles of the training of our program,
right.
we're focusing on that cadence control. You've got to understand the importance of that cadence control. Let's talk about how that connects to martial arts. Now, here's the connection. It's my martial arts instructor said to me, he goes, David, basics produce results in spades. Took me years to understand that. Now I get it. It's if you do things from a repetition standpoint, like you say, do it slow, so we do it fast. It becomes second nature. It becomes a state of no mind. It's mushin, which is a state of no mind. You don't even think about it.
Right.
So we want our clients to get to that sensation of don't have to think about it. This becomes natural, but you got to focus in on it at the very beginning.
Right.
As good as you might think that you are, what they find themselves doing is I can't hold 90 RPMs and stay in zone 2 because it's they thought, okay, I'm just going to work the power range. It didn't matter what cadence I was looking at. Every time that you spin faster, heart rate goes up unless you learn how to balance it.
Right.
So that's connection.
Right.
That's the connection.
Yeah. No. I'm again. I sipped the Kool-Aid before I got here, Coach. I sipped the Kool-Aid before I got here. So this I intend to blaze into my mind because this is the system.
Yeah.
This is the system, but it all makes perfect sense to me, and I think from here back, I'm overly familiar with. Right. Talk to me a little bit more about the power and over the entire span of the work. Right.
Absolutely.
So we're looking at power from a performance standpoint, right? Because power is an output, right? Correlating that to cadence, absolutely get it. Correlating that to force and torque, totally get that. And endurance, certainly when we're talking about what zones you're in, their power that correlate with each of those zones. Speed development, and how to be faster. Was probably one of the earlier questions I had you before we knew one another. I was kind of working on my sprints in Zwift, and understood the concept of cadence and really getting my cadence up high in order to really get a good sprint without necessarily having to mash a harder, bigger gear, which by the time I get up to speed, they're already gone. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit more about just kind of the power side of this.
Absolutely.
Because it's sticking.
Okay. Here it goes. 2 pieces to the puzzle. It's fast twitch and slow twitch.
Right.
And we talk about that all the time, but
right.
people don't understand the concept behind why the words are being said. So power is, in my mind, this is the way I see it, is understanding that there's fast twitch and slow twitch fiber. Everybody has it. Everybody has it. So when you look at training peaks, it's a perfect example. You look at training peaks and you say, okay, I'm a climber, I'm a time trialist, I'm a sprinter. But what we're doing here for that client is getting them to understand how to utilize all 3. That they become good climbers, they become good sprinters, they become good time trialists. And a lot of it is power duration of learning how to actually drive it.
Got it.
Right? So let's take it now a step below that. So fast twitch fiber is those fibers that fatigue fast. Fatigue real fast, that's sprinting.
Right.
That's sprinting, it's the ADP, you only have 20 seconds of it. So I prescribe workouts, you'll love this, I prescribe workouts that are 25 seconds so that your body understands how to utilize that 20 seconds. Because the first 5 seconds is just getting up to speed.
Right.
The last 20 seconds is now you're using that ADP in your body. So leveraging that type of strength and or twitch fiber is important. So to learn how to utilize this is even better. So when it comes to speed, now here's another level. When it comes to speed, if we don't know the gear and the cadence to sprint with based on how much torque we can put out torque
Right.
we can put out based on how much distance per pedal stroke we're carrying, based on the gearing that we have, will determine how fast we go.
Right.
But if we don't have endurance, we can only sprint for 2 seconds, 5 seconds, and then we slow down.
Right.
I had a client said to me, okay, my max power is 1800 watts. I'm like, okay, great. So why aren't you winning races? Because he had no endurance.
Right.
Because at the end of the game, that doesn't matter how much power you produce.
Right.
If you don't have the endurance to support the effort that you put, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So when you look at how power is collective in all of the key aspects of the system, this is just the output, like you said, of all of these pieces.
Right.
So if you have endurance and you want to do an endurance ride, how long can you hold your endurance in zone 2 and zone 2 power for the duration of time?
Right.
If we haven't focused on how to control it? And that's slow twitch fiber.
Right.
Right. So it's all about fast switch and slow twitch fiber and how you utilize it.
So just in my mind, I'm capturing that, and I always like to capture something and give it back, and you can verify, validate. So that's really looking at measuring power in the intervals and in the durations, right? With ideally 20 minutes and above being kind of for the FTP overall endurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the 5 minutes is the, like we would say, attack, or and then the 20 second, 30 second your sprint, right? And then what duration do you look at for climbing?
Doesn't matter.
Just doesn't matter, right?
Doesn't matter.
Like I did the race in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
It was a climber's race. I knew that going in. I just knew that going in. So I wasn't there to race as much as to train. So I know I'm going to be out here for 4 hours, 4,500 feet of climbing on gravel. That's what it's going to be. What I underestimated was I came in a little bit heavier than I wanted to be, and then trying to find my cadence without my heart rate skyrocketing, in climbing. And what I found is those climbs were 90-minute climbs, right? 90-minute climbs with 15-minute descent, right? And I thought after the race, I was like, okay, so here's what I need to work on. I definitely need to work on more at threshold, but cadence at threshold, but maintaining my heart rate, because once again, when you keep climbing and you keep spinning, your heart rate just keeps going up, and I'm like, all right, I'm getting lightheaded now, and this is starting to suck, right? Yeah, no, it started to suck bad, right? And then that's when, again, those ugly conversations come up, which I was going to ask you, just in terms, where does the mental side fit into this? Do you bake it into these into each component of it? Because that inner dialogue part is crucial. I think that's the word I'm looking. It's crucial. Like, it's a make or break, right? And the development and the cultivation of that has to happen in training, but it also has to happen in the race environment, because you just can't simulate a race environment. Just the energy and the nerves and everything else that kind of comes along with it. Training just won't give you that. Right.
So I'm going to answer that question for you. You might want to turn the flip chart over, because this is where the real stuff happens.
All right.
Okay. We're gonna talk about that component, the cadence component.
Right.
And I'm gonna answer your question. This is where the next layer of the program becomes. Actually, put that up on the wall.
Yeah, I was about to say,
right up here. There you go. Right up on the boom. Number one.
Start and we'll work our way down.
So that's it, baby. Here we go. Now we're gonna take another layer. This is we have the top layer. That's a 30,000 foot layer.
Right.
30,000 foot.
You gotta start with vision.
Okay.
Right.
Now I'm gonna take it down a little deeper. I'm gonna go a little deeper. The rabbit hole goes deep. Let's talk cadence now. Let's really talk about cadence and the impact of terrain. So you're talking about climbing, right? So what I've learned and what I've studied and what I've created is a cadence band chart. It's Powerful.
BAND.
Yeah, BAND. It's a band. There's
Right.
bands of cadences to be selected and used for various situations. Okay? So here they are. Here they all are.
Right.
All right? So we all know that people say 90 plus RPMs is the golden standard. Okay? True. In endurance. So endurance training is 90 plus RPM, small chain ring, period.
Right.
So write that down.
Right.
It's endurance training is 90 plus RPM, small chain ring. Okay. There's a reason. We are utilizing slow twitch muscle fiber. Talked about the fiber last slide. Okay. Utilizing that slow twitch muscle fiber and building what we call that mitochondria in your body. You're building a system. You're building that system now. You're building that system. So 90 plus RPMs is the actual thing we want to have our clients focus in on, and it's staying relevant in zone 2 heart rate. That's a balancing act, period.
Right.
Period.
Right.
People can do it for 5 minutes, but when you start doing 2-3 hour zone 2 90 plus RPM workouts,
right,
consistently pedaling,
right, you gotta know your heart rate is going to creep up. It's, you know, depending on your fitness.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. So our programs are designed to level the playing field higher and higher and higher because of the fact that they're starting to balance it better. So when you start seeing that heart rate drift, and how long does it take to get to that point?
Right.
Are they fueling up correctly? Are they, you know, what's the fitness level that they're at?
Right.
Currently?
Recover, you know, do they sleep, you know.
Right. All that. So that's the first piece. That's 90 plus RPMs. Now, the next level is cadence drills. We have cadence drills that we use. This is so cool. So the cadence drills go from 90 to 120 RPMs. Now, not just from 90 to 120 RPMs, just whatever, willy-nilly. There's a specific cadence interval inside that workout.
Right.
So it's 90 RPMs for 15 seconds, 100 RPMs for 15 seconds, 115 RPMs for 15 seconds, and 120 RPMs for 15 seconds for a minute. That's difficult to do.
Right.
Because we're getting the brain and the working muscles to think, not just do. So in a 1 minute span, they're going through 4 cadence bands in 1 minute.
Right.
And they do it over and over. And the workout here is only 30 minutes. That workout's 30 minutes.
Okay.
But you do it repetitiously week after week after week, so you find yourself getting better at the way that you pedal.
Yeah, I like cadence drills, and usually after you do them, you don't even become aware of how your cadence will readjust itself, right? It's, your body just doesn't even think about it, and now you're spinning at 100. You're like, it doesn't even feel like 100 now.
That's right. That's right. Now, the cool thing about this is, depending on what gear you're in, will determine how fast you go and how much power you produce.
Right.
Because cadence drives power.
Right.
That's clear.
Right.
Cadence drives power.
Right. And
so
cadence and gearing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's not a sprint. We're not talking sprinting.
Right.
It's just cadence work.
Exactly.
Cadence work. Getting supple. Getting supple. Next level is understanding that there's climbing cadence. There's a climbing cadence to this. Okay. So climbing cadence is important.
Yes.
Okay. So the question you had asked earlier is, what cadence should I select to do this and keep my heart rate balanced? Right. So cadence for climbing, what I see and what I've learned, depending on the variation and or the terrain itself, is between 73 and 79 RPMs. If you look at your data, you'll see it.
Mm-hmm.
Right around that range.
Right.
Anything higher, your heart rate goes up.
Right. Anything lower, your mass and then power.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So utilizing your gears effectively will determine how fast you climb the climb. So 73 to 79 RPMs is key if you want to control the heart rate. Now, if you're racing the climb, it's like 83 to 89-ish, 90 RPMs, sometimes 95, depending on how fit you are. But in the basic principles of training, we focus on the 73 to 79 RPM range in zone 3 heart rate.
call it race pace.
Yeah, race pace. You're putting out the effort. You're putting it out.
Right.
You can climb it or you can sprint it.
Right.
Okay. Now the next level is gets deeper. Is all right. What if you need to go for a sprint? So sprint cadences start at 100.
Right.
Okay. That I call that the run. Okay. No, that's the approach cadence. So anything lower than 100 RPMs, you're mashing, and people are gonna pass you.
Right.
Just gonna pass you.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to react.
No, there's no reaction. So having the right gear
Right.
and the right cadence will determine how fast you jump. Okay. So on top of that, when we think about the cadence overall in an actual sprint, it's between 112 and 125 RPMs will determine. It all depends on how strong the individual is. So your next sprint you do, if you get up to 112 RPMs, and when you were let out or you started the sprint at 100, once you stand up, that 100 is going to go to 112 like that.
Right.
Just because now you're using body motion and working the bike as well. Even indoors too. You can still work the bike indoors.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you get into that 112 range and finding that right gear, you're doing, depending on if you're in a 53, 15 or 14, whatever it may be, you're doing 35 miles an hour.
Right.
Clearly, if you look at your cadence and gearing chart, it says it.
Right.
It says it. That's why we also focus on our program on track racing. So taking the track principles, what track racers do, that's why they say, oh, I'm gonna ride a 126 or 146 or 156 gear ratio. There's a reason why they say that.
Right, because they know what the power output can be in terms of speed.
Bingo.
Right.
So we use those same principles in the program, but we never say it. We just never say it.
We use it in mountain biking too. I mean, so and it depends again a lot of time on a race.
Yep.
Right. If you have a climbing race, do you want to run a 34 or 36 on the front, or a 30 versus a 30 or 32? That'll give you a little bit more spin. Right.
All right. Here's the next level. We're going a little even deeper. Okay. A little deeper for you. So everybody wants to talk about interval training, right?
Right.
So we're going to talk about threshold work. There's a specific cadence band that you use for threshold work, and the number is 93 to 95.
93 to 95. That's my race pace, actually.
There you go. And you're right at threshold.
Yep.
Makes sense,
every
right?
bit of it, right. Every
right
bit
at
of it,
threshold.
right.
Because now 93 to 95, you're using a bigger gear, and you're carrying more distance per pedal stroke, and you're going faster, but you're at threshold level.
Right.
You're right at the threshold. You're not going anaerobic. I mean, sometimes you tap into that, but a lot of that is based around being able to balance that effort. Right. So 93 to 95, based on the cadence and the gearing, will determine how smoothly you go. And that's from an FTP test, I would say, based on the article that I wrote that you see right in front of you, we talk about that cadence band. We talk about it because that keeps the rider focused in on balancing the cadence and the effort.
Right.
Once that's understood, their balanced effort around FTP becomes better.
Right.
Okay. Next level. Next level. All right.
Actually, I'm not gonna put that.
Yeah, that looks like we'd be doing a commercial, right?
Okay, that's number 2.
Go down first before I go ahead, right?
All right, cool.
Make these two.
Very cool. So now, let's take another step lower. So we already know that from a threshold standpoint, we're working on that 93 to 95 RPM range.
Right.
Now let's talk speed.
Right.
So we can ride fast. And remember, I said at the beginning, it's not how fast you go, it's how you go fast.
Right.
This is how you go fast. So threshold work between 93 and 95 RPMs, but there's a very small difference between threshold work and speed work. And here it is. 93 to 95 at threshold, speed work is 97 to 102. You look at any good time trialists on the tour, they're riding right around there.
Right around there. Right.
Right? And they're crushing it.
Right.
And you see the difference between 93 and 95, that's only 2 RPMs difference. But think about the gearing that a person using at speed versus threshold. They're riding faster. They're in VO2 max,
Right.
zone 5.
Right.
This one was in, threshold was in zone 4. So they're balancing that effort. That's VO2 max. That's anaerobic work.
Right.
So the gearing and the cadence make the difference. Make the difference. Just in 2 RPMs difference.
Right.
There it is.
Yeah,
That's
cadence the determiner.
100%. 100%. Because remember, once momentum is there, you maintain it with gearing and cadence.
Right.
And endurance.
Right. Once you spin into it, just stay in it. Right.
Boom.
Yeah, you just sit in it.
Sit in it, because
Right.
your endurance can support it.
So, question.
Sure.
And I'm trying to marry this into what I know about mountain biking and gravel cycling. So our cadence, we're not able to keep a consistent cadence because of the terrain, right? You could have a pedal strike, or there's just doesn't, you just can't keep that unless there's a flat straightaway, right? But we do a lot of ratcheting. Come back, torque forward, come back, wah, ratchet yourself up to get over type of things. Actually, I answered my own question. That's actually more of a skill than an actual training technique, right? Because this is going to build that stuff, right? That, again, with the skills, then you can just apply however it needs to be applied. I answered my own question.
There it is.
I answered my own question.
Because it doesn't matter.
Right. It doesn't.
matter.
No, it doesn't. It
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. And there's my my rebuttal, particularly for indoor training, because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Because you're building a skill. You're building a skill in a system to support any discipline.
Right.
Any discipline.
Right.
Any
Right.
discipline.
Yeah, no, I can see that. It's
Right.
going to support any discipline.
Anything. Now let's go back to the 90, 100, 110, 120 drill.
Right.
Think about the ratcheting that you're talking about. Is if the client doesn't know how to leverage cadences and not shifting gear,
Right.
because you don't want to spin either.
Right.
You don't want to spin.
No, they definitely don't want to spin.
You don't want to spin out because you'll lose traction.
Right.
So learning how to be supple but still be able to push power
Right.
to get
Yeah.
over that.
Literally, I had a young man, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, coach, I know you talked about cadence when it comes to the roots. He's like, but I've got to figure out my gearing a little bit better because I'm spinning out. Right. I'm not getting enough power when I come over it. And that's it exactly. Is you have to find that balance between the two, cadence and gearing.
That's right.
Right. And I think, so certainly would love to hear from you kind of ways, and I'm hearing ways that we teach that. But I for me, it was a feel. It's a feel, right? I mean, if you have the torque in your pedals that are giving you the power to kind of go over it, and just kind of feel like, hey, I'm spinning my legs here and I ain't going nowhere. Right.
But coach, it goes back to the first principle, endurance. If the person doesn't have good endurance, the other pieces are just okay.
Right.
If they have a high level of endurance, they can be able to push that momentum and learning how to utilize, because once that momentum is there, they maintain it with their fitness, will get them over the terrain faster.
Faster. Definitely faster. Right.
Because if their energy is low, and we talked about energy at the very beginning of our conversation, that's all based on energy systems that we're talking about.
Right.
Is how much, and we'll talk power profile analysis in a bit, is why we use power analysis around energy, not just around how much power we can produce.
Right.
Because every system is engaged in this principle, is engaged in it. And we'll talk about those 6 principles here in a minute. But getting the endurance for the rider to understand that there's endurance power is real.
Right.
And that's why we focus a lot of our time endurance training first. Oh, this is boring. Well, yeah, it might be boring, but it's purposeful.
Right. No, I say it all the time. I tell people, I say, you're going to feel like this isn't doing what you think it should be because you have in your mentality the old go in here and pick up weights until my arms are falling off and everything else. And this is not, that's not how we do this, right? That's not going to get you where you need. I try to tell folks all the time, my first job is to make you an efficient machine, right? It's to create efficiency in you because you are the machine. You're the motor that makes that bike go. So that's what we have to work on first, is making you to be more efficient. We get you efficient, your performance and everything will follow thereafter.
Yeah.
Right. And I think my own personal experience, I think for a lot of folks, we overtrain. We don't realize that we're doing too much. Because we think that we're supposed to be doing it that way. That's the way it's supposed. That's the way we were always taught. Burn yourself out. I can't lift my arms. Right, exactly. And that's not the way to get it done.
No,
right.
It's not efficient. It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable for sure. Very detrimental too, because you're waiting for burnout. You're waiting for injury. You're waiting for something that isn't going to get you where you want to be. Right, it's pushing you away from where it is that you want to be.
Right. So Coach, I'm gonna throw another level at you. Here's the next level. So we're going down. So how do we know this works? Well, I'm gonna tell you how this works. It's testing.
Right.
There's 3 tests we do, depending on what level that you're at. Okay. So at the very beginner level, it's a very simple test. 5-mile fit test. 5 miles. Okay. In a controlled environment. Why just 5 miles? Why not like 10? Why not 8?
So 5 miles is, for some folks, that's about 15 minutes.
Give or take.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So next question is, in that 5 miles, what zone do you think we want them to focus in on?
For a fitness perspective, I think we want to do zone 2 just to see if there's any time for any mission for creep in their heart rate or anything, just to kind of see if there's any movement there. That might not be enough time. 5 miles. Why 5 miles? That's for a lot of folks anyway. That's 15 to 20 minutes. So it's not enough time for a heart rate to creep.
So would it be zone 2 or would it be a different zone?
No, I think we need to be higher.
Correct.
Yeah, we think we'd have to be higher. We'd have to do zone 3. Right.
Boom.
Right.
And
have
here's
to
why.
do zone 3.
And here's the reason why.
Before you say it.
Yep.
Zone 3 would allow them to tap into the other fueling system, and again, it would show us if there was a reduction in power of what their fitness would be.
Bingo.
Okay. All right.
100%.
Right.
100%, because they can see that over time.
Right.
The more fit they become is one piece. The second piece is how efficient they become pedaling.
Right.
Because it's all small ring. It's not a big ring issue. This is small ring work. And how efficient are they at zone 3? And not going into zone 4 to be able to balance that. It's still long enough.
Right.
And from a mental standpoint, you asked the question around how do you mentally approach this component. That test is all mental because they're trying to balance that heart rate between zone 3 and not going to zone 4. Because once they understand and they get to zone 4, they slow down.
Right.
Because they know they don't want to go over that range.
To dial back, and even knowing how to dial back. Right.
Intensity.
Right.
Learn how to balance the intensity.
Balance and intensity.
See how powerful that is?
Yes.
5 miles. You learn all that in 5 miles.
5 miles, right.
Every month. They do it every month, every 4th week. So they see the change in their fitness over time. I have clients right now, Coach, that have gone from 15 minutes down to 12 and a half minutes in the same heart rate zone.
Right.
Efficiency has going higher, and their efforts are more consistent based on how fit they become over that duration of time in the program.
Right.
80 to 80-28. Now, on the intermediate program, they do that 5 miles, and they also do an 8-mile fit test. So I'm going to ask you a qualifying question. In 8 miles, how long do you think 8 miles takes?
So again, I'm just going to go based on kind of what my thoughts are with some of the folks that I'd probably put it at about 25 minutes.
A little lower.
A little lower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
20.
What is that? What's 20 minutes?
It was FTP. Right. That's
Right.
the FTP.
And what zone are we going in?
So we'd definitely try to go zone 3, zone 4.
Not even zone 4. It's still zone 3.
Zone 3,
because what we're trying to figure out is if they can do 5 well
mm-hmm.
and still not go into zone 4, they can do 8 and still not go into zone 4.
Right.
Because remember, they're here as they approach the program. They go from beginner programming,
right.
not beginner rider, but beginner programming. They get the 8-mile fit test. They're able to then balance 5. How much control can I have for 3 more miles?
Right.
And that takes around 20 minutes to do.
Right.
Which is pushing the ceiling higher so that when they do their FTP test, they know how to balance it.
Right.
So they can do it consistently. They
right.
can do FTP tests consistently.
That's the key point right there, the consistency in it. Because that's my only, well, that's my biggest drawback to the FTP test is consistency and my athlete doing it with some consistency in it, right? I know the first one there was going to be nervous and all the other stuff that kind of comes in it, but just them doing it regularly with some consistency and making sure the ritual that they go through in advance of doing the FTP test is also has some control. We know people can be stressed. We know that they may not have slept. We know they didn't eat, they didn't hydrate and other things. I'm not quite sure how much of a variation between their performance by not having gotten enough sleep and then doing the FTP test versus having been well rested and doing it. You know, is that a 4%? Is that a 5%? I don't know. That's again some of my drawbacks to using the FTP test, just because people don't always test well.
Right. It's just a snapshot in time.
It's just a snapshot in time. And I know, I had one of my athletes. He was like, "Coach, I want to get a power meter for my mountain bike." I was like, you can do it, but you know, like the power meter is more beneficial to you riding indoors. Sorry, that's just my, you know. Again, I know there's just way too much coasting that we do when we're riding outdoors
Mm-hmm.
to get a consistent
That's
power
true.
profile from anyone. Because I look at my power and I'm like, well, this says I put 93 watts out. Like I can barely turn the wheel. You know, like I know I was riding that was not 93 watts, but it also factored in the time that I wasn't pedaling.
Zeros.
Right, exactly. So, you know, I'm like, I don't know how much it's going to give you. You know, that could be useful to you. So I'm not into just collecting data for the purposes of collecting it. So, you know, I took my power meter off my mountain bike and put it on my indoor bike because I have to dual record when I race.
That's right.
That way I didn't waste it. But I didn't say it wasn't doing anything for me outdoors.
Right.
Because I can't train in the power zone outdoors. Not consistently.
Not consistently.
Right.
Because we are talking about consistency wins.
Right, exactly.
Period.
If I can't do it consistent, then what value is it?
That's right.
Well, good. Well, you verify and validated that point for me, for sure.
Yeah. So now you see the leveling up, 5 to 8.
Right.
About 20 minutes, 21 minutes, depending on how fit they are.
Right.
So the next step or the next test is an FTP test. Of course, I have to do an FTP test, but not just any FTP test, a consistent FTP test.
Right.
Every 6 weeks. In the first year. Okay, to build some key things, some mental toughness.
Right.
As we want to build that.
Right. Yeah, because you definitely need to get your mind right for an FTP test if you're doing it right.
That's exactly right.
Right.
But you need these 2 pieces first in order to do that consistent.
So, beginner, intermediate, ongoing.
Yeah, well, yes. So beginner, intermediate,
Right.
intermediate,
Right.
and there's one more.
Okay.
There's one more. So beginners do this. Intermediate.
And that, I'm sorry, just one. Is it the FTP test, the full FTP 60-minute?
No, it's just 20.
20-minute. Okay.
It's 20. It's 20. The 1 hour power is a different program.
Okay.
Different program.
Right.
Yeah, that's the elite level.
Right.
But there's a reason why that is.
Right.
So beginners at 5 miles, intermediates 5 and 8 miles, and FTP test, and one other test, ramp test.
Ramp test. So, I thought the ramp test was an FTP test. Okay.
Different. Now there's a reason. There's a reason. So we look at ramp test and FTP test differently. So the FTP test is how much control can you have over a 20-minute period. So I don't do the 0.95% of the FTP. That's a whole nother program we do an hour. So the 20 minutes is, I want to see how much power you can produce in 20 minutes,
Right.
not at 0.95%. So if you do
So
this,
it's actual power.
the actual power, 20
Right.
minutes, how much power can you produce in 20 minutes consistent and in control? And when you look at your power output on Swift, you'll see at around 10 minutes if it drops or not.
Right.
If it's controlled across the 20 minutes, that means the aerobic system is strong, that they can support it. You see it immediately in the file. You
Right.
see it immediately in the
Right.
file. You see it immediately. You don't even have to say anything or do it. Okay, well, you dropped to 10 minutes.
Right.
Because your aerobic system, it hasn't been developed yet. And you start seeing the variation over that time frame, over every 6 weeks, that you start seeing the length of that FTP test goes longer and longer and longer, that you're able to hold zone 5 power in the red the entire time, because the aerobic system is supported.
Right.
So the ramp test is different than FTP test, because we're looking from a ramp standpoint, how far can you go until you can't go any longer?
Gotcha.
Now it's still mental,
Right.
right? Because usually what happens, Coach, what gives out first?
Your legs.
The legs.
Right.
And they say, oh, I could have went harder. Well, no, you couldn't.
Right.
That's it.
That's what you said. Your leg didn't say that.
Right. The test was over when you were done.
Right. Period.
That's it.
Period.
That's it. Right? Oh, I could have gone. No, you did exactly what you need to do. So then the next level then becomes, when you look at the ramp test in the next phase, it's how much further did you go?
Right.
Until you either got to this point, whatever your heart rate was at your max, did you supersede that number? It could go 1 step higher, 2 steps higher. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at the focused intention to the effort.
Right.
That's why they're different.
Got it. Yeah, no, one, certainly the 20-minute FTP for purposes of defining training limits and setting standards around kind of what zones we're going to train in as a power, but RAM test certainly is a validation of your training and your fitness. How far can you go? Right, how far can you go? And then next time, how much further can you go?
And it's all up here.
Right. Yeah.
And it's
And that incorporates mental fitness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Has to.
Yep.
If you're doing it right.
That's right. That's right. So Coach, you've seen 3 levels of the program. From 30,000 foot, now we're at like 15,000 foot or 10,000 foot. Because this here is all still very basic. This is what people kind of know.
Right.
But when it attaches to that, it becomes powerful.
Right.
It's powerful. That the 5 mile is purposeful. The 8 mile is purposeful.
Right. Yeah. No, I see it clearly. Right. And then, I mean, you said it earlier. We ain't doing stuff for the sake of just doing it.
Nope.
Right. It has to bleed into, foster something. Right. And I get it. So again, the RAM test. I've always looked at the RAM test as an FTP test, but can now really see how that can be used as an indicator for changes in fitness.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, 100%.